All right, guys. So, my favorite Supreme Court Justice, Clarence Thomas, has made some interesting comments about weed. Yes, that's right. He made some interesting comments about the weed. Okay, trying to channel my inner Stephen A. Smith here. As he says that federal laws against marijuana may no longer be necessary. Now, this comes as a shock to a lot of people because Clarence Thomas is arguably the most conservative judge on the bench out of the 6 judges, conservative judges. And him saying this, it's kind of a big deal because it just kind of shows where people are headed and where the population is headed in terms of how they feel about this issue. But of course, Washington is always behind the American people, right? Even when both sides typically agree on this issue, right? In regards to marijuana, right? And how outdated and draconian the laws are. So Clarence Thomas has spoke out about this, and I want to discuss this because I thought this was a interesting topic to talk about. So let's read here. Clarence Thomas, one of the Supreme Court's most conservative justices, said Monday that because of the hodgepodge of federal policies on marijuana, federal laws against its use or cultivation may no longer make sense. Quote, a prohibition on interstate use or cultivation of marijuana may no longer be necessary or proper to support the federal government's piecemeal approach, he wrote. His views came as the court declined to hear the appeal of a Colorado medical marijuana dispensary that was denied federal tax breaks that other businesses are allowed. Thomas said the Supreme Court's ruling in 2005 upholding federal laws making marijuana possession illegal may now be out of date. Quote, federal policies of the last 16 years have greatly undermined its reasoning. The federal government's current approach is half-in, half-out regime that simultaneously tolerates and forbids local use of marijuana. Dude, he's exactly right about that. Essentially what he's saying is that, listen, I'm not going to say whether or not it should be legal based off whether or not people should be allowed to smoke a plant or put whatever substance they want in their body, right? He's not making an argument based off that. He's making an argument that the federal government is just inconsistent in regards to enforcing it, right? It's technically illegal at the federal level, but they're turning a blind eye to states that are legalizing it while at the same time saying that it's illegal, right? And this is leading to some complications, specifically in regards to businesses that participate in the marijuana industry. Okay, and it's blatant kind of disregard for the federal government in terms of their own laws and enforcing them consistently, right, across the board, right? And I think that is what Clarence Thomas is actually saying. But I will say, Clarence Thomas has indicated in the past that he has some strong libertarian leanings, just like I do. So he probably would agree with the idea that the federal government doesn't really have the authority to regulate what people can put in their bodies, okay? To regulate commerce to that extent. Matter of fact, we do have a hint in regards to how Clarence Thomas feels about the federal government regulate marijuana, because in 2005, the U.S. Supreme Court heard arguments in a case pitting California's Compassionate Use Act, a voter initiative that legalized the use of medical marijuana within state borders, against the Federal Controlled Substances Act, which outlawed the use of marijuana for any purpose anywhere in the nation. The question before SCOTUS and Gonzalez versus Reich was whether the federal ban, which was based on the congressional power to, quote, regulate commerce among the several states, may be lawfully applied against medical marijuana that's cultivated and consumed entirely within just one state. Now, the feds won 6-3. The Controlled Substances Act, quote, is a valid exercise of federal power, declared the majority opinion of Justice John Paul Stevens, who maintained that the Commerce Clause must be read conspicuously so that Congress has the tools needed to reach such level activity as a part of a comprehensive national regulatory scheme. Writing in dissent, Justice Clarence Thomas complained that, quote, if Congress can regulate this under the Commerce Clause, then it can regulate anything, and the federal government is no longer one of limited and enumerated powers. Ding, 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 ding. That's a strong conservative right there, okay? That's a principled conservative. You can criticize Clarence Thomas for a lot of things, but that's a man standing on principle, okay? Especially when back in 2005, conservatives probably were not as friendly to marijuana as they are today. But this man has been kind of on board with this for a while. I think he's on point in regards to how inconsistent the federal government is. And because they're inconsistent, they might as well just legalize it, right? I mean, most of the American people are on board with this. And I think that the American people are right on this issue. 36 states now allow medical marijuana and 18 allow recreational use. But federal tax law does not allow marijuana businesses to deduct their business expenses. Under this rule, a business that is still in the red after it pays its workers and keeps the lights on might nonetheless owe substantial federal income tax, Thomas said. Again, this is blatant discrimination against businesses that are legal in the state, right? The IRS still comes through and takes more money out of their pocket than they actually should compared to other businesses because they're not allowed to deduct their business expenses. Because technically the business is illegal at the federal level. Again, it just shows how messed up it currently is and how this needs to change, right? For the sake of business, right? For the sake of commerce, for the sake of freedom, for the sake of jobs and industry and things that conservatives say we're supposed to be for. The Department of Justice has instructed the nation's federal prosecutors not to pursue cases against marijuana businesses that follow state law. And since 2015, Congress has prohibited the Justice Department from spending federal money to prevent states from carrying out their own laws. But the IRS continues to enforce its own rules against growers and dealers. The federal government's willingness to look the other way on marijuana is more episodic than coherent, Thomas said. Amen, I agree. So this is interesting, because I feel like the politicians, although the American people are for it, right? Like, and you see, that's why it's being legalized at the state level, because the American people, even in red states, are like, we just want to legalize it, right? We want to legalize it. It should be legal. But yet the politicians can't get their act together and actually legalize it. In my opinion, it's funny because for all those people that love talking about police reform, right, and how bad policing is in America, in my opinion, one of the reasons why I think that police reform is kind of silly, right, to a certain extent, in terms of it being a priority from those on the left, is that a lot of negative interactions with the police can be prevented by just ending the war on drugs, right? Or just, at the very least, legalizing marijuana. At that point, you get rid of a major reason, right? A major probable cause for why police pull over people in the first place, right? Something that leads to a lot of interactions is, well, I smell marijuana, so therefore, I have the right to search a vehicle and yada, 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 right? That's more interactions with police. And in my opinion, instead of marching for police reform, they should have been marching to legalize marijuana, right? Or to end the war on drugs. That's what they should have been marching for, because that would have done more to save people's lives and to prevent negative interactions with the police than any amount of police reform, in my opinion, because you give police a reason not to interact with those people in the first place. I'm just saying, right? That's my argument. Again, this is why I think that the left's priorities are backwards when it comes to a lot of these issues. And it's funny because, for as much as Democrats claim to be pro-legalization, right, they have not done anything on this issue, even though they can. Now, I don't think Biden's actually for legalization. And Chuck Schumer claims to be for it. And the House Democrats have passed legislation to make it legal. However, it just hasn't went anywhere in the Senate. And Chuck Schumer is currently leading the Senate, and it has not been a priority, right? They prioritize everything else, like making Juneteenth a holiday and doing this and doing that and talking about how they trying to be woke when they're not doing things that actually matter, right? And lead to the outcomes that they say they want. They're not actually doing that, because I think that this should probably be a priority. It's a win for either party. Either party that does this, it's a win. But both parties, in my opinion, really are dropping the ball on this. And I think that the Democrats are more culpable because they pretend like they want it. Okay? Republicans, on the other hand, they're just behind the times. Okay? Let's just be real. They're just behind the times. They're behind the people in their own states because of, ideology and such. But let's read about the Republicans here and how some of them are feeling about marijuana being legal in their own states, although they're not actually sold on legalizing it at a federal level. This is from Politico. Marijuana's popularity boon in red states isn't breaking through, with conservatives on Capitol Hill pinching on an already narrow path to federal legalization. A growing number of Republican senators represent states that have legalized recreational or medical cannabis, 6 approved or expanded marijuana in some form since November, but without the support in Congress to make up for likely Democrat defectors. Weed falls critically short of the 60 votes needed to advance legislation. Montana's Steve Daines and South Dakota's Mac Rounds, both Republicans, said they don't support comprehensive federal cannabis reform no matter what voters back home voted for. Quote, I oppose it, said Daines, who is otherwise a lead sponsor of the Safe Banking Act, which would make it easier for the cannabis industry to access financial services such as bank accounts and small business loans. The people in Montana decided that they want to have it legal in our state, and that's why I support the Safe Banking Act as well. It's the right thing to do, but I don't support federal legalization. Guys, yes, you just read that. Dude is saying, I support helping our legal cannabis industry at the state level, right? Help them as a business, but I don't want to legalize at the federal level. Bro, these politicians just blow my mind in terms of how they think about stuff. They really just blow my mind. They know how popular it is. They know that people want it, so they'll support legislation supporting it as long as it doesn't legalize it. I don't understand. This is a layup, and conservatives just aren't taking layups, okay? They're not taking layups. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is vowing to push a far-reaching federal legalization bill, even if President Joe Biden isn't on board. But before he can corner the White House on the issue, Schumer must convince at least 10 Republicans, possibly more, since Democrats like Senator John Tester and Jeanine Shaheen are unlikely to back the measure to join his cause. Lawmakers whose constituents have already approved some form of legal marijuana are seen as the most likely to support loosening federal restrictions, but so far Republican senators appear largely unmoved by the will of voters when it comes to weed. In some states such as Montana and South Dakota, marijuana did better on the ballot than their senators. Not surprised by that. Politico spoke with dozens GOP senators who represent medical or recreational cannabis markets in recent days. None committed to vote to remove cannabis from the Controlled Substances Act, but Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska and Kevin Cramer of North Dakota said they were open to discussing ways to remove federal cannabis penalties. Others, however, said they were not on board with any type of federal cannabis legalization legislation. Quote, I think they can do other narcotics and things to relieve people's pain and suffering, said GOP Senator Richard Shelby of Alabama, where medical marijuana was legalized earlier this year. Again, ding, ding, ding. That tells you what the issue is, right? It's Big Pharma. It's Big Pharma. I mean, he just told you. He said, I think they can do other narcotics and things to relieve people's pain and suffering. Basically, what he's saying is that, well, we have an industry to protect. Right, we have the big pharma. We have to protect them, because if people are just allowed to just grow a plant, or just go and buy this plant, then that's gonna threaten big pharma. Right, they're gonna lose sales because of this, and hence this is why they're not legalizing it. Right, they're cool with making it, supporting it on the state level, but they don't want to do it at the federal level. Okay, because doing it at the federal level, that opens up the floodgates. They don't want to do that. Okay, and the dude is just straight up telling you. When asked if he believes his position is in conflict with the will of Alabamians, Shelby replied, quote, I don't know. You have to have some principle yourself. Principles like what? Right? The limited government principle that conservatives are supposed to be for, that Republicans are supposed to be for, except in situations where it's not convenient, right? Where they don't want it. For example, right? Sorry, I'm channeling my inner libertarian here for this video, because they're right on this issue. Right? So, a little bit more here. 3 out of 18 states that have embraced full legalization, Alaska, Montana, and Maine, are represented by at least one Republican senator. 3 dozen states and counting have also legalized medical marijuana, including conservative strongholds such as Alabama and Oklahoma. Exactly. So, conservatives are on board with this issue, but the Republican politicians who claim to be conservative aren't, right? Which shows you just how out of touch our politics are. And guys, I mean, I'm the type of person to say, you know, just because a bunch of people want something doesn't necessarily make it a good thing, right? I do say that about certain policies, but when it comes to this, look, man, it's not any more dangerous than alcohol, okay? And it's a basic principle of freedom, right? Freedom and limited government. Legalize, tax, regulate it, okay? Spend the tax money, which is only funded by people who use the plant to, I don't know, help people get off harder drugs, okay? To spur more industry, right? I mean, you would think that politicians would just take the layups to do things that are good for the American people, except they don't, right? They don't. And this is what's wrong with our politics. But I think it's important that Clarence Thomas has expressed that, hey, you know, the federal government is being inconsistent on this, and him being the most conservative judge on the bench, arguably, hopefully will, you know, change some minds and hearts. But, you know, I highly doubt it, because that big pharma money, it keeps things kind of the way they are. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.